One of the other points that the article brings up is that just frankly cutting someone off like very quickly is a more emotionally quick reaction than having to sit with the discomfort of thinking complexly about a situation or the discomfort of having to resolve or work through conflict. The article says Worthy noted that self help is much older than social media, but that reading an entire Brene Brown book, for example, takes far more commitment than passively consuming what's presented to you in an algorithmic feed. I think previously it might not have been so easy to find content to validate what you already feel. Advice is not just easier to find, it's easier to follow too. Earlier iterations of self-help often stress that hard work of building and maintaining relationships, of opening up and connecting with others. That's more arduous than simply removing from your social network anyone who causes you discomfort. 2 decades ago, Robert Putnam lamented the breakdown of social ties in Bowling Alone. Americans, pressed for time and money, were abandoning their bridge clubs, bowling league, and broader community obligations. And Putnam diagnosed a generational posture towards society. But what's going on now is different, a generational mutation in the philosophy of interpersonal relationships. Philosophy. So I want you to really think about this. Like, why is this happening? What do you think are sort of some of the causes driving it? So this article is arguing that, like, if you are having conflict and you've never been taught like resolution tools, if you don't have a deep emotional well of understanding how to like move through interpersonal conflict, which is through no fault of your own, like society does not train you for that. Schools only train you to be like a productive member of capitalism. So why would you know how to functionally resolve conflict? And if the tools to understand that are by reading perhaps longer books or having like longer conversations with medical health professionals, and then you instead get your mental health advice from an Instagram page that says cut off anyone who makes you uncomfortable, obviously it's much easier and more accessible and quicker to do the thing that is like the least resistance, which is just to block, cut off, whatever, instead of having to like work through the discomfort. And the question then becomes, what does a generation raised on that, like what does that do to our world? The article then goes on to say, why is this happening? Maybe young people have been inspired by the impermanence and infinite choice baked into online dating and social media. Maybe our brains have been pickled in wellness culture and self-care rhetoric, which stress the need to privilege our own well-being above all else. I believe it was Audre Lorde who said that they are shocked by the narcissism of wellness culture. Or maybe we're just good American capitalists encouraged by the cult of individualism to think of ourselves as compelling brands, the main characters of cinematic star vehicles, the centers of the universe. The line between internet advice and bona fide mental health guidance can get a little blurry. A few TikTok personalities have branched out into something that looks more like therapy, charging for one-on-one consultations. And I spoke with professionals who told me that this school of online advice has made its way into their consultation rooms. The beauty of a tweet is its simplicity. You hear a gavel bang at the end of each sentence, but that doesn't correspond to the messiness of life. And then it asks these very, very pertinent questions. What mistakes can we make and still ask for forgiveness? What do we owe one another? What do we owe ourselves? Here was also a really interesting thing. It said, social media by its nature can make people appear more extreme than they are. Consider a recent incident involving Lindsay Ford, a 21-year-old influencer from Spokane, Washington, who posted videos on Twitch of herself playing fantasy games like The Elder Scrolls. Though her modest audience follows her for gaming content, she has also been candid about her anxiety and panic disorders, as well as her relationships. Sometimes on Twitter, she'll offer a bit of advice. Last year, she posted, "Here's your reminder that unless someone explicitly told you with their words they are upset with you, there is no need to worry yourself sick. You have no mental or emotional obligation to people who do not communicate with you, no matter how much you love them." The tweet was shared more than 50,000 times, in many cases approvingly, but others saw Ford message as wrong or even dangerous, describing it as an insane thing to say, and a great entry in the short but rich history of sociopathic advice on social media. I'm curious, what do you think about that? Because this implication that you only have to resolve conflicts of people who speak to you directly, it sort of makes sense in the individualist capitalist lens because it absolves you of having to ever do like emotional labor or emotional work. Whereas I think the collectivist lens and like the caring community care lens is saying that like showing up for one another is it shouldn't be so you focused. It's like everything is not about you. Like everything is not about just you optimizing yourself. It's about creating community, fostering connections that last a lifetime, showing up for each other even when it's difficult, reaching out even when someone hasn't reached out to you, showing up for someone when they might not have the words, they might not have the, intellectual emotional space to know how to reach out, but it's saying that like you're more than this like reductive hyper individualistic thing. And I think that the article is arguing that social media and these types of things have made us lose that, have made us lose this ability to think complexly and long term about our relationships. And now with like the hyper era of just like you have extensive choice, you can just discard things, discard people. And that type of culture, when you can just discard anyone who disagrees with you, what kind of culture does that create? What kind of people does that make? Like people that just believe that the second they're uncomfortable, the second someone disagrees with them, the second they have conflict, they can just cut them out of their lives forever. What does that do to your psyche long term? What does that do to the psyche of a community, to the psyche of a society? I think that's the main question that we're trying to get to with this article and with this video series I'm doing.